call this workshop of the Gainesville City Commission for March 28th, 2023 to order. Thank you all for being here. It sounds like we may have a few more folks outside. And just to kind of set the idea for this, we're going to talk about the Power District. And it's been a long time since we had a substantive discussion here at the Commission about the Power District. A lot has changed since the last time we had a discussion, and most folks were not up here when we had the last discussion. So I'm hopeful that we as a commission and as interested community members and staff can kind of get a reset and figure out what the history of the project is, what the tools that we have to work with are, and start to put together a vision for where the commission wants this to go. I will tell you, I don't have a preconceived notion for what I hope this will be, other than something that is good, that fits our community, that 10 years from now we can be proud of looking back. I will also say, just to set the stage, that while we have a piece of property, and that property has tremendous value to the community and to the city as an organization, it may not have quite the market value that some folks think it may have. Maybe it does, I don't know. I want to also set the stage that we are not here with $50 or $100 million in our pocket as a city organization, waiting to spend that to make this into something more marketable. We do have some relatively small or big, depending on how you think about it, pot of money that is available to put a few things together. And we do have, again, acres of downtown property. We don't have the luxury of letting it sit there any longer, in my opinion. It has reached a point where something needs to be directed from the commission. What I hope for when we leave here today is that we will have heard each other, we will have heard from staff, we will have heard from some of the community, and that we will have kind of a timeline described. Not looking for final ideas to be done today, certainly not. But I do hope that we can have a timeline available for the commission, for staff, and for the community. And to be honest with you, my hope is that by this time next year, I hope that we are actually doing things with that property. To assume that it'll be sooner than that is probably wishful thinking. We move slowly. When we move too quickly, good things don't tend to happen. We want to be thoughtful about this process, but we want to move. I want us to move with intention. And again, I would hope that by the second quarter of next calendar year, we can actually see things happening with that property. That's just my goals for today. Madam Manager, well, actually, let's go ahead and adopt an agenda. What do you say? Do we have any? Second. All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Madam Clerk.
Our only item for the agenda is 2023-321 Power District Workshop with a recommendation that the Commission hear a presentation from General Government and GRU staff on the Power District.
Madam Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Commission. This item will be presented today, a combination of general government staff as well as GRU. Mr. Cunningham, as you well know, is in Tallahassee today. And so he has asked Kenzon Hutchinson, his lead manager, to be present for GRU's portion of the presentation today. And so with Mr. Philman, Andrew Persons on the GG side, putting some historical context to this project. It is an asset that is on GRU's side of the books, and of course they have an important, interest in how this, the disposition of this property. But it is inside the GCRA. It is inside the GCRA's budget for a limited amount. I believe it's a little over $450,000. And we can talk about that and how it might be used as we move forward. There's history around this simply because there was an RFP in play before that did not successfully conclude in a project that has moved forward, which is pretty much why we're here today. But with that, just some history around the project, Mr. Mann, if you and Mr. Persons can put that context around the discussion.
Just before you started with that, Mr. Hutchinson, why don't you go ahead and join us up here as the GRU officer?
That's so special.
Just for balance, you know? I mean, yeah. Right, you're the ranking GRU officer here today, so. Okay, Mr. Mann.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, ironically, you talked about how long we've been looking at this. The city started looking at this project in 2013. When staff originally started looking at this and the GCRA started looking at this, we were looking at three primary parcels of property for GRU. The northern parcel, the parcel where their warehouse and distribution center used to be, and this vacant parcel to the south of their holding tanks. And that was in 2013, so that was 10 years ago. Also on these parcels, this is McCrory Gardens, which we proposed to carve out still. And then this is the Catalyst building that the city now owns and the GCRA has restored. So it started in 2013 with this. In 2019, it was expanded to the larger section that you see now. And what was considered was the same original parcels and also the admin building parking lot, this area north of this vacant area, and at the time also considered was this area and where the RTS Rosa Park Station is now. After further consideration, those were removed due to both technical and environmental issues. The transfer station, GRU has some underground facilities there that we can't build on, but it was perfect for the transfer station. So, that's where we're at. And then in 2019, we went out with an RFP that Andrew's going to talk about. Again, still preserving McCrory Gardens, still preserving the Catalyst building, and moving forward. When we looked at this, at the time that this was looked at in 2019, this is one large site with several buildings on it. This is the old Fleet building. This is GRU's old water warehouse. This is their former water meter area, and this is one of their engineering buildings up here. Those buildings are in various state of repair. I think the building in the warehouse, the roof in the warehouse has started to fall in, but inside it has a very good skeleton if somebody wanted to actually renovate that. But what we've been talking about now is because it's one parcel, and the original project that Andrew's going to talk about was one massive site and one massive plan. If the commission wanted to if we wanted to parcel this off and have multiple developers instead of one large developer, we would have to do a lot split. Or we would have to do probably a minor subdivision to break this up into multiple lots so that we could bring other developers in, or the other alternative would be to have one master developer oversee it. But I'm going to let Andrew talk about staff's recommendation on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to talk about the RFP that was issued in 2016. Request for proposal, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, Andrew Persons, special advisor. That's a lovely picture. That is the power district as rendered by through the invitation to negotiate process that the city went through in 2016. I actually was one of the panelists on the ITN, was one of the evaluators, and sat through approximately about a year's worth of work on this. This was immediately preceded by a request for qualifications, an RFQ, in which 3 companies were qualified to participate in the ITN. Ultimately, the commission and the committee evaluated 2 respondents for the ITN, with Cross Street Partners being the one that was selected by unanimously by the panel and ultimately by the commission. And I'm happy to come up and speak if there are questions about the ITN process or some of the nuances of the proposals. I looked in the audience, and I think besides from Christy and maybe Mr. Lyons, we're probably the only ones in the room closest to this, the original work. I will say this is probably the closest that the city ever got to actually developing the power district in line with the 2013 redevelopment plan that was adopted and has been consistently upheld by the commission and by the GCRA board as the preferred sort of approach to redevelopment of the power district, which is primarily a mix of housing, residential offices, the emphasis being adaptive reuse, small local businesses, a mix of market and affordable housing, very much what you see in this rendering. Ultimately, those negotiations, as the commission is aware of, fell out because Cross Street Partners had some significant restructuring during that time. But there was quite a bit, I think, to glean from this process, both in terms of what it would take to achieve this vision, what was being asked of the city during that process, both in terms of long-term involvement in the property, because this was very much a P3 managed development proposal where the city and the developer would be locked into this property for many, many years with significant public investment to the tune of about $30 million of public investment to achieve this vision. So this is, I think, while the ITN is in the past, the plan still remains, and I think many of the same factors at play are still here, although, of course, the city, as you all know, is in a different place than we were then. So I wanted to touch on some of staff recommendations. These are in consultation with our folks over at GRU. From the staff perspective, I think these are the really sort of watchwords for the commission to consider. Is it maximizing the potential sale proceeds of the property? I did want to clear up, because there was a little bit of confusion, I think, a few years ago. The city has always considered, from the get-go, sale of the property, a sale of the power district. There was never a point in that time when the city was going through the RFQ and ITN process where there was concept of the city somehow holding on to the property or developing it ourselves or even entering into some sort of like long-term land lease. Those things are very difficult to achieve from the private development standpoint. And ultimately, any redevelopment out here is going to be done by some combination of 100% private sector or some combination of public and private partnerships, similar to what was discussed several years ago. So obviously, between GRU's requirements that the land be disposed of for appraised value, so they would get a return on them on their property holdings that would likely go to debt defeasance. That is a primary recommendation and concern from staff. The second is recommending recognizing the existing environmental liability on the site, and we have staff here who can speak a little bit more in detail about that. And this is really related to the fact that this is 17 acres of industrial property that had been in industrial use for a very long time. There are certain aspects that have been discussed both through the ITM process all the way through all of the planning that relates to daylighting portions of the creek. Those are what that second bullet represents, is the potential environmental liability in daylighting the creek. And that's beyond sort of some of the logistics and regulatory and other types of hurdles that or issues that would need to be addressed. And then finally, the seeking opportunities for economic development in the site. And that's primarily, I think, what you all are going to talk about today is sort of what is the best approach for achieving those first two bullets and then ultimately providing some direction. So we're not sitting here 5-10 years from now, wringing our hands trying to figure out what to do with this property. So we're here to answer any questions, and but that's what we wanted to share. And I can put
Commissioner Sacco.
that back up if that's helpful.
Mr. Person, before you vacate the podium, on the last slide where it shows the priorities, are those in general or in that particular order?
I would say probably the first, the environmental liability would be number one.
If I could,
Sure.
if I might, I think it's appropriate for Mr. Hutchinson to
That's a good
speak on
point.
behalf
This
of
is not,
GRU at this
ultimately is not our property.
Mr. Hutchinson, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
The bar, not the light.
Mayor and Commissioners, I think they're both equally important from the standpoint of course, we're trying to maximize on the actual property itself, but also even as it relates to the things that we have, as it relates to any type of development in that area, just how much of an impact it would be from an environmental standpoint. There's been said to be quite a bit of contamination within that area, so of course, all that plays a part into what we do with the property.
So I know a couple weeks ago we ran into this issue with another parcel. Do we have any updated assessments of these properties? Or are our last numbers from 2016?
Mayor and Commissioner, I do have Tiffany Davis. I can let her come up and just kind of talk a little bit about the building so we'll have a better understanding of what the buildings look like. But also, I do want to mention that our intent, of course, is to hear as much as possible, any concerns, whatnot, and then we'll come back with a plan based on what the commission has set forth.
Ms. Davis?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tiffany Davis. I work in real estate at GRU. So we did have a couple different environmental assessments done in 2015 and 16. We had a phase 1, a phase 2, and some additional assessments after the phase 2. So there was some levels of contamination found in some of the original, the 2013 site boundary. Particularly on one parcel where the north half of the creek, where that area where that culvert is, would be daylighted. So that's kind of an area of concern. And then for the south half that goes to the Kelly Plant industrial site, that in itself it's an active industrial site. So there could be some concern there. The newer expanded boundaries, so where the admin building is, the west parking lot, the RTS properties, things like that, there's been no environmental assessments done on any of those. And nothing recent.
And as far as, that covers the environmental component, but as far as value of that property, the last assessment we did for price would be back then? 2016?
Yes, so we had a 2016 appraisal done, bless you, again.
Thank you.
Worth, you're welcome. We had a 2016 appraisal done for the original boundaries, so parcels 1, 2, and 3 that were identified in the initial power district boundary. And then we had a 2017 appraisal done of the GRU admin building and our west parking lot. So those are the most recent appraisals that we have.
But still pretty outdated, I'm gonna bet.
Not too bad.
I've seen
Yeah.
the price of property. It might be a little outdated, but I guess it'll give us somewhere to start off. Because I don't know the answer, how quickly, or I guess how lengthy is an assessment done to just do a property appraisal, at least for a value, I know the environmental one might take a little longer.
So it depends. If we go with the same appraiser, which we would probably do, he would just update it from the 2017 or 16 point forward. So it'd probably take a couple weeks,
Okay.
not too long.
That's a better answer than I thought we'd get. Well, thank you, ma'am.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. So, well, I agree with you, Mayor Ward, that I don't want us to rush into any one direction. I do think that's the first step that we'll have before anything. We can't decide that today, but I think staff can hear us. Given the other parcel we talked about a couple weeks ago, this is the first step we're going to want to know before we really decide the uses or intentions of any of these areas to see where we can build, what we can do, what we can sell, what we probably can't or would have to sell with a lot of conditions to help clean it up. I guess it goes, Kinson, do you know if because I'm not an expert on this, I don't know. When we cleaned up Depot, did we have outside funding for that? We had outside funding. When we cleaned up Depot Park, we had outside funding that we applied for. Okay. Do similar opportunities exist today to help decontaminate? I'm sorry, Ms. Davis.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to stay up here. I think it'd be better. So to answer your question about Depot Park, so Depot Park is part of the manufactured gas plant, so we can refer to it as a MGP site. So it's a brownfield site recognized by the EPA, sorry. And so we do have federal funding set aside for that project. So that's a separate project, though.
But as far as this, would similar funding opportunities be available with this amalgamation, let's call it?
Only, from my understanding, only if DEP or the EPA recognized it as a site. And I'm sure we would have to go through some sort of assessment, or they would have a criteria to meet that. We definitely would not want to be known as another brownfield site, though.
Okay, I was going to ask, like, what are the pros and cons here? But given your tone, it doesn't sound like it'd be a cost-benefit analysis of outside funding versus the reputation.
Yeah, and there may be additional funding available, different types of funding. Just I'm not aware of any because I'm not an environmental person, so to say.
No, I appreciate it, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, I think to follow up on that one, seeing the value, seeing the opportunities prior to, alongside concurrent with hearing what our community has preference for or need for. But I think until we get those updated assessments, we can have all the conversation we want, but that's like the first piece of solid information we will need moving forward. But thank you, Ms. Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Sucko. Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know who can answer this one. On Cross Street Partners, was that a local company?
No, ma'am, they were not.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it. That's my question. Thank you. That I conclude.
Commissioner Book.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the scale of this particular boundary, it's massive.
Yes.
Right, 17 acres plus, Mr. Hutchinson. And so something I would be interested in would be the updated appraisals that Commissioner Sacco, that's absolutely essential. We would need that. And I'd really like to see that as it relates to the parcels parceled out. In other words, what would it look like, not as one 17.5 acre piece, but if it ever did have to be broken up, if there was ever staff that said, this is a piece that we could sell, this is a piece we could develop, this is a piece that could be park and recreation space that we would want to maintain, how would that be done? So the appraisal would be piece one for me. Piece two would be staff coming back with the opportunity to say, if this needed to be broken up in ways that might be palatable for the future of the city, what might that look like? Piece three would be what rezoning would have to apply to do that. In other words, what would be the process and the timeline for that? And then the last piece would simply be, I think Mr. Mayor and colleagues would be holding something like a community charrette, because we've been talking about since 2013. You have a lot of feedback, but feedback changes over the course of time. Our financial picture has changed over time, and that would be something I'd like to see done within the next few months, potentially, so that we could find out what do we envision for this massive property with some pre-appraised information before that was done. Those would be some of my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Eastman.
Thank you. So on these parcels, I see there's parcel 5 is the GRU admin building. I recall there was a number of discussions a couple of years back about potentially moving to the EOC building and using that admin building. Where are we with that, and what is GRU's view of it now in terms of your operations?
Answer that.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Mayor and Commissioners, so we've been in discussion about that to figure out what the plan would be, what it would look like for us moving out to the EOC, and really trying to gather costs. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tiffany, the last time we did some type of estimation to do that, how long ago was that?
About 2 years ago.
And so with that, determining what that cost would be, and of course, we would have to get an updated appraisal to see what it would take, but looking at where do we want, from a commission standpoint, making a decision, do we want to have downtown presence? What does that look like? Where would those places be? And what all would it take for us to be house all the individuals that are in the admin building? So those discussions are still in place. Just really trying to define what the cost would be from an updated standpoint to determine what that looks like, but also waiting to see what type of direction the commission may give in order to do so.
And that kind of follows up my next question. This is, of course, all everything we're talking about here is Gainesville Regional Utilities land. So anyone, the board who is directed to oversee Gainesville Regional Utilities will be making the final decision on this, which is currently us. But if that changes over to an independent board of some kind, they would be deciding what happens with all 6 of these parcels. Is that correct? All right.
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
With our zoning power.
Yes, so I guess I can jump into that portion of it. I mean, one of the things I feel like with this is I would still like to have some control over these 6 parcels if that moves forward. And it looks, I don't want to say, I have no idea where we stand in terms of likelihood of the legislature. It's not my expertise, but how do we ensure that we have that our community has some say in what happens within these 6 parcels? So I don't see the city attorney here, but I'd be curious about, this was previously, as you mentioned, a public-private partnership that was going to be long-term 20, 30-year discussion with them. As I'm looking through a lot of the things from the 2013 plan, like the implementation of a Sweetwater corridor, a mix of retail, housing, and public space, a number of these things seemingly could be done by deed restrictions as well, correct? And we would still be able to put those in early. I guess I'm kind of looking at Andrew Persons or anyone who could answer.
Mr. Mayor, there are, I think, possibilities of different ways that the commission could condition sale or use of the property. Anything that we did in terms of that would have to, of course, go through legal review to make sure, because there are bond restrictions on the that GRU has to experience. So anything, if you say condition the property where everything could, nothing could be taller than 2 stories, or the only housing could be 30% AMI, affordable housing. Those things would probably run afoul of GRU's bond restrictions related to the potential disposition of the property. But otherwise, I think yes, there are like mechanisms through deed restrictions or other types of covenants that the commission could still potentially affect how the property developed outside of just using your zoning code essentially.
Right, and our zoning right there, if I recall, section 1 up there is U9, and then 2 is a mix of DT and U9, but then we also have an overlay, correct?
There is when the redevelopment plan was completed, and during that time when the ITN and was moving forward, the commission at the time actually adopted a special height zoning map for the power district, which is different from all the other. If you remember, you've had a number of meetings with different projects with like height step down between here and the historic district or single family. In the power district, it's somewhat unique in that there's a height step down adjacent to the residential areas on the north and eastern side. And then that height to the maximum height actually steps up in a sort of zigzag pattern up as it goes back. So that's the height restrictions that actually are adopted in our code that only pertain to the power district, that were there to implement the redevelopment plan and then the work that was going on with the ITN.
Great.
Can you repeat that? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to hear that again so I understood.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So there's, for this property, for the, really we're talking about parcels 1 and 2, which were part of that original power district delineation. There's height restrictions that were adopted specifically by the commission for these properties that deal with a height step down that starts essentially at the northern and eastern property lines that abut the residential area. So that height against those districts is, I think I want to say 3 stories, and then as it goes in a depth into the property, and then the height starts to step up in a stagger step formation. It's unique to the power district because that was discussed during the redevelopment plan. And so that plan obviously is not regulatory, but that height restriction that was adopted is to implement that, the height delineations in the redevelopment plan. So that's in code. We even have a, a figure in code which applies just to the power district.
Yeah, because when I go back through the 2013 original plan for this, I mean, it's very well thought through. There was a lot of community input into it, and I'm just looking at what other mechanisms we would have while still moving with some haste, while we still have, control over what happens in this site, or just in general, like that we did that previously through a power purchase, or not power purchase. Sorry, GRU's in my head lately. Through a public-private partnership, but how. So another thing that was a big part of this was the adaptive reuse of some of those buildings. Remember there was on the CRA side, I remember a facilities update on there. Where are we in terms of being able to do adaptive reuse with those buildings? Are those still feasible?
I'll let Tiffany, because I think you have probably better information about the current state.
So I'm trying to think of when we did the last study on the buildings. It's been at least probably 10 years. Since then, of course, they haven't been maintained. They don't have a human presence in them. They don't have air conditioning running in them. So they've started to deteriorate. So I would say out of all the buildings, let's see, can I back up? Word. Let's see. Oh. I know I was trying. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to go quickly just through the buildings. So that'll probably be easiest. So building A and B. So that should be our fleet building. Yeah, so that is the fleet building, or what we refer to as the old fleet garage. So buildings A and B are still in very good condition. They could definitely be reused and repurposed. Building C and D, well, building C probably could maybe potentially be reused or repurposed. That would require some additional, just investigations and things like that. Building D and E, not at all. They need to be completely demoed. Building E had a water leak, and the foundation is probably compromised at this time. Building F is the old warehouse, which I think either Phil or Andrew had mentioned earlier that the roof is starting to collapse. So that one, but it is all concrete and steel frame construction, so it could potentially be repurposed and just re-roofed. And buildings G and H are probably in moderately poor condition. They potentially could be reused or repurposed. Just depends on what the potential buyer would want to do with them.
Great. And while I still have you up here, there's been a lot of discussion about the daylighting the creek, and I know there wasn't a full assessment on that. What is the potential environmental liabilities of that, and what is the potential of daylighting portions or the entirety of that creek?
So as I mentioned earlier, we had the Phase 2 assessment that was done, the environmental Phase 2 assessment done back in 2016. And at that time, the north half of that creek runs right, actually it runs, well, as you see, it runs next door to buildings E and C. Mm-hmm. And so there was some contamination located in where building E is. So that we consider what I refer to as the north half of the creek. So it is in a culvert through that area. So there is some potential because we know some environmental or some contamination exists there. So anytime you open up the ground, there's possibility for contamination there. And then of course the area, the south half goes through the Kelly plant site. And that portion of the culvert that goes through the Kelly plant is actually an engineering control. It was installed by the Army Corps of Engineers to help with erosion control many, many years ago. And so could not be disturbed.
It could not be.
It could not be.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, I don't think I have any more questions now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Commissioner Cheston, I'll get back to you in just a second. We'll go through another round there. I just had a few comments I wanted to put out before we do the next round. And the first thing I want to say is that after we go through our next round here, we'll ask for public comment. And I would remind everyone, many of you either have not done public comment or haven't done it in a while. So we do ask that you fill a form out and bring it up to the clerk's table right over here, so that we have a record of who's speaking next and can hopefully address your concerns and questions adequately. The first thing I would say is that the only thing missing on our list of 3 items was, I think the first item is maximize public benefit. And that kind of goes without saying, but I think we should say it. Maximize the public benefit. Yes, we want to reap whatever financial benefits there are for the city, but we need to keep that first and foremost. What does this do for the people who own it? That's you all and us. But I want to make sure that stays front and center. There are several considerations. If we could, actually, this is good enough. As far as daylighting the creek, back in 2017, I was adamant that we had to daylight the creek, and I've mostly been there throughout. But the more I know about what's possibly underneath and what might happen if we start putting shovels in the ground there, the more I think maybe we could achieve a similar result by building some sort of boardwalk over it and turning that into an environmental education walk that connects to the creek on the other side of 4th Avenue. So, of course, Sweetwater runs from the duck pond, north of the duck pond itself, all the way down, crosses University Avenue, and then has 4 blocks of park on the south side of University Avenue. When it crosses back, maybe we turn that into some kind of linear park that is sort of boardwalked and above the ground so that we don't have to disturb whatever it is underneath. Just a thought. And maybe that's crazy, but I wanted to put it out there before I forgot it. It is possible, I think, and I remember back in 2017 when this was sort of, if not on the market, at least in discussion, there were folks who were very interested in buying the administration building and the parking lot and then leasing parts of that back to the city / the utilities, so that if we wanted to maintain a presence for bill paying and that sort of thing, that's entirely possible without using the entire building. So that is something that we should keep in mind as well. And I know that our real estate professionals and our land professionals, you already know that, but it's worth putting out there into the public understanding that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, that there's an opportunity to continue to use part of the building even if we don't own the whole building anymore. Let's see. Kind of the purpose, somebody mentioned this to me last week and I knew it but had forgotten it. Part of the purpose of building the EOC in the first place, part of it was that we needed more space, but part of it was also a consideration of what it would cost to update all of these buildings. The idea that we could pour millions of dollars into updating these buildings and making them more modern usage, or we could just start from scratch with thoroughly modern utility administration areas. And those thoughts built toward the idea of just bonding a whole brand new facility, which is what we eventually did. And I imagine that back then the idea was that fairly quickly the commission would find something to do with these buildings, and we did not. I say we, as a body, we did not. I'm heartened to hear that there might be some salvage opportunities from these, that at least a couple of these buildings still might be usable. And that opens up some other possibilities for things we might do community-wise. And that could be done in a relatively short term, that we could actually start getting some use, or at least temporary use, out of some of these buildings like A and B. Some of them, I walked around in some of these 3 or 4 years ago, and I know that they're honestly not usable anymore. But some of them are, and the ones that are, maybe we consider what those opportunities are. So I would ask that in addition to, I'm pretty sure we're going to head toward a updated set of appraisals, that we also consider what it would cost to bring the buildings that are useful up to actual useful conditions, and what that might look like, what it would cost, what are the opportunities as part of our thought process going forward. And again, this is a workshop, so we can't vote, but that is some of what I would hope to see coming back to us when we have an opportunity to vote. Okay, so we have a couple of lights. Let's go to Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you. I want to go back to Commissioner Eastman's point about who would own this property, the 17 acres, who would have control over it if the GRU bill passes. And so I would say that that is something that we would ask the attorney to work on in negotiating what portions are in the bill. As we know, the bill is still in bill drafting, so I think it's worth negotiating. Just want to put that on the table.
Thank you. Commissioner Chestnut. Commissioner Eastman.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. That was another one of the things I wanted to point out, or what was previous, your point about having structuring that section that's over the Sweetwater Creek. In the original plan that came forward that I saw from Cross Street Partners, there was a significant amount of that 30 million that we were going to be putting into there was how are we going to be doing that creek? How are we going to be putting that forward? I would hate to take off the table that we wouldn't at least put in a water feature or something of some kind, but I think part of our role here as city commissioners is not just to solve every problem right out of the gate, but a lot of times it's to set aside the land to prepare ourselves for a future commission when, they're in a different situation to be able to take that. And I think, speaking with staff, it appears as though, maybe I should follow this up, but that it would be so easy to put in at least an easement along there that would, even if we were to sell it or even if we were to lease it or however this goes forward, that we could make a multi-use path that would go through. And it's always been my dream that the multi-use path, because it would connect all the way up north to Sweetwater, go through, I think the Sweetwater corridor that they call that through there. But I actually think it would be quite a nice path to be able to go through Depot Park and then go through the back end of that Kelly plant, which is currently not really being used. I think there's just storage back there, but it can't really be redeveloped either because there is potentially a ton of contamination within that section, but it could still be used as a multi-use path that would go through there, and honestly, kind of a neat one where you're able to go through very industrial areas up north through past the Matheson, past then into the Duck Pond area, but that may not be something that we're looking at in the next 2 or 3 years, but we need to at least think about what could be possible 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so, just looking at putting an easement right along on top of the Sweetwater Branch Creek so we can do that in the future is probably something to keep in mind.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Okay, we don't have any more lights, so Madam Clerk, let's go to the people.
Okay, our first speaker is Mary Fukuyama, followed by Leona Gauthier.
Good
Welcome.
day, Commissioners, Mayor Ward. As a neighbor and as one who went to some of the citizen input hearings in 2013, I'm fairly aware of the process and I applaud the efforts to get input from the neighborhood. It's intimidating to think about high-rise buildings across the street from our houses. I live in a southeast historic district. I'm remembering that the different architectural zoning that was mentioned, and that was one of the ways to approach that. I would just briefly want to support that there would be a dedicated green space between the community garden and the creek, as we would call it. If we're going dense, we really need the green space. I also support the idea of local development that can be sensitive to Gainesville's spirit. And in some ways, I'm very happy that Depot Park was developed the way it was. It is a destination park. It's the most integrated space in our town. It's the most environmentally attuned space in our town, and it does good for the environment. And I would like to see that those values also extend to the development of this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leona Gauthier.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Mary pretty much covered most of what my concerns are. The building heights is, I'm very invested in. I'm right across the street, both sides. So, that would concern me, and I'm glad Andrew brought up the staggering. I wouldn't want to see it, more than three stories lower if possible. But so, daylighting the creek. I guess I kind of have a question for Tiffany about the daylighting it. Is it because of the contamination from the buildings or the contamination in the ground that would be a liability, an environmental liability?
Go ahead.
So the assessment that I referenced, the phase 2, the contamination was found in a soil sample.
In the soil?
In a soil,
Okay,
yes.
So it would be, okay, so it's the runoff that we would be concerned about.
Yeah, that would be a concern. Mhm.
Got it. Okay. I think that's.
Thank you. All right, thanks. Let me say, before we go any further, I did not mention and meant to mention that I absolutely intend for the community garden to continue to exist, and as far as I'm concerned, that's not on the table. We will continue to have the community garden exist.
Holly Blount, followed by Donald Shepard.
Kelly? Yeah.
Thank you. I wish the community could get as long to respond as what we've heard so far. But, and I will also wish the outreach had been more vigorous. I know when we passed petitions that resulted in the community garden, that was door to door. So a week ago, we should have had door hangers all over the neighborhood. And we should look way back in time about this because it was in 1999. And could I get slide from the year 2019, please? I think it was in 1999. You mentioned that a charrette, a design charrette, was held in the GRU building. It was during the expending of grants for planning of a depot park and that outreach. And they put us in groups of 10 around aerial photos and told us to draw what we imagined the neighborhood would look like. Every single one of those drawings showed the creek open, and all but one of them showed extensive green space preserved in addition to the garden. And amazingly, for a meeting led by political people, someone stood at the front and said they promised to do our highest priorities. So we brought that back to the commission a few years ago. That was in the Chase and what was the other guy? I forgot his name. But we brought up this meeting, and we were told that we made it up. You don't have any record to prove it, and that we were attempting a land grab. Now, here was residents of an area trying to get public land dedicated permanently to the entire public, and that was a land grab. But what the neighborhood really wants is the preservation of the open space, daylighting of the creek, and it's been expressed so many times, and that it would become a real jewel for the neighborhood. Is this the pointer? Okay. So here's the garden. When I moved into the neighborhood, 6th Street right here came straight through, and this entire space had been nothing but trees and grass for some 70 years or so. And Mr. McCrory, whom the garden was named after, lived right there and had mowed that all entire time and led 3 neighborhood efforts to fight back city attempts to turn it into a heavy equipment yard. And the last time when I was in the neighborhood by then, and we ended up with the garden, but also losing the bottom part to employee parking that now sits unused and vacant, those 2 concrete strips and fencing. And those buildings that one of your body referred to as blight is our scars from that time. But they promised that we could keep this open space. And so what the neighborhood wants is rezone all of this, 6th Terrace to the creek, 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue as rec and open space permanently, and to begin the reopening of the creek here. It's only going to get more expensive. And you can extend this beautiful strip park you described on down to 5th Avenue now. And acknowledge that we had promises in the past and they ought to be kept. And by the way, you want to make value from this? The well-being of the citizens is currency for local government.
I don't think we're arguing about anything at this point. There will be lots of more meetings, by the way. This is the first commission conversation we've had in a long time about this, so. Shepard.
My name's Donald Shepard. I'm People's Representative, and as People's Representative, I like when Mr. Carlos Blunt brought to attention of the City Commission, because I remember this very detailed, that this was talked to back in 2019, and it was a argument between the commissioners at the time and Mr. Blunt and the citizens that had came here, that live in that neighborhood. It was talked that their lot one would be turned over to the Blunt family and to the residents in that area for a garden. Only a small section got turned over to them. The whole area, according to history documents, was of the gentleman that lived down the street. That was his land, but as I said, it was an argument. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that the CRA, I visioned, when we mentioned about CRA, I visioned, let's bring CRA into town so that we can take and have the transporting of CRA people and closer to town. That was just one of my things, and there's funding there for that. I haven't heard about the Engine Corps of Engineers, the Army Corps of Engineers, and I want to learn more about the Kelly plant. GRU plant. That there, I'm wondering the history of that. So I'll save my questions till later on that. But in the area, that 17 lot area, I like what you had said, Mr. Ward, the mayor, about putting what you said to put in that area. I think that's an excellent idea. A retirement home in the area would be another ideal. That would be great, because this is the park to be in there, to have elderly place to go, and the duck pond, Sweetwater District. I want to wait on that question too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question of Mr. Shepard?
Sure, real quick.
Mr. Shepard, I just didn't understand, sir, what you said about the transporting of the CRA persons. And I just wanted to understand what you were speaking to there.
What my, may I speak, Mayor?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. What my thought was of bringing the CRA district to that area, because of the money that's left in that fund for that area, for that parcel, I guess you call it, would be in the asset, a city and CRA or gathering of, they'd both be the owners of that area. And as you know, CRA works for the city. So this would be an applicable opportunity for to bring CRA back into the city. This is a thought I had, which I would like to see.
Yes, sir.
CRA
Thank you.
back in the city instead of way out there on Hawthorne Road where you have to travel, 2-3 miles to get to. And there's a half an hour time of travel. So,
Yes, sir, you're right. What you said actually has value, and as the Madam Manager had actually clarified, this particular area is in what is now a consolidated GCRA, is that correct, Madam Manager? So monies and funds as it relates to the GCRA actually has some applicability to this, and there are actually some funds in the neighborhood of, saying 400,000 or so that are already there. So your idea has merit, and it is in fact in the GCRA. I just wanted
correct.
to.
And it could be
Thank you, sir.
more money back to the city. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jackie Davis, followed by, I believe this is Randy Batista.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity, and also it's great seeing so many neighbors of my neighbors here. I live in the neighborhood. First, I just wanted to mention, I appreciated Commissioner Eastman's point about there's some concern that we may be losing municipal control of GRU. Couldn't you just quick deed it to the city? And remove that issue, so you'd have time. Anyway, it's a thought, but I'm going to go and talk more about what I'd like for the area. Realtors say location, 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 and this is a prime location. This will either be a jewel for Gainesville and make Gainesville better and more wonderful, as some of your ideas say, or it could be, a disaster. What the commission did with Depot Park, we all know was, they hit a home run. That's wonderful. Sweetwater wetlands, that brings people. I was just there Monday, and there was a guy from Maryland who came down there just to look at the birds. I mean, we have some wonderful things here, and I think we can continue it with this spot. I really like what Commissioner Book said about breaking it into parcels, and I think that's what all of our neighbors feel like. We would like it to be parcels, not some big out-of-town place who wants to get the most units per square inch. We want it to be local people, and there are already proposals like Tim Larson and Brent Larson, who did 4th Avenue Food Park. They want to do a food park, which they could do in one of those buildings y'all showed. I think she said it was C. That would be awesome. The big warehouse that, the roof is good, the metal and why not a 24/7 farmer's market? We have these thriving farmer's markets, but one's here one day, one's here another day. Why not one 24/7? Restaurants, businesses, everyone would like that. And have some of it in, nice townhouses or something, because I know Shands and people like that say they can't get faculty, or they can't get, can't recruit because nobody wants to live way out in Hale and there's not enough housing. So you could do some really nice townhouses where someone could just ride their bike to work at Shands if they're on call without destroying the character. And, but we really like the idea of using local developers. Another local developer who'd be really good, and I talked to last time this came up in, I guess, 2019, was Svein Dugelbod. Yeah, and he did Celebration Point. He's local, and he's done some really nice little things. And let's keep the business local. Let's see, what other points did I have? I really like Commissioner's books talking about making it a mix of public and private. And then we do need a connector that goes all the way through, like Commissioner Eastman said. Sometimes I work with the people at Sweetwater Inn, the bed and breakfast on University. And, I'm talking to the people there, and they're like, well, where can I go? Where's a nice place to take a walk? And I want to tell them how to get to Depot Park, but it's like, if we had this wonderful little walkway, bikeway, wouldn't that be awesome? And it'd be great if it went from Depot all the way to Tom Petty Park. Thank y'all so much. And thanks for thinking, considering the neighbors, not just the number one priority of making the most bucks.
Thank you.
Randy Batista, followed by Michael Blackley.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Board,
Welcome.
and Commissioners. I've been in Gainesville since 1969. Was privileged to go to the University of Florida. I had a business here. I invested in the property downtown that now, at that time when I moved in there, was a desolate city. And I'm just so thrilled to see what has happened downtown Gainesville. And it's been through the efforts of development, people really stepping up to, when the chips were down, people would come down there and do it. You need to do yourself a favor. Go up to the Cade Museum and go up to the second floor and take a view just directly east of that. And you can see the potential that whole corridor has for the future of this city. You've got Depot Park, you've got Sweetwater Branch, you've got all of the new restaurants that are coming in on Main Street. And then you've got this facility that should be a gem for the community, because my sense of it is that if we build something that is truly unique, use those gas oil tank buildings into studios with a green roof, step away from being, getting maximum value for the, development, but try to make it, this is a signature piece for the city of Gainesville. And then that follows into downtown. Downtown really needs some help at this stage as well. So my sense of it is you need to be visionaries first and then say, what can we do with this property that would really make Greenville, South Carolina, has this development that is just unbelievable. They've developed this whole parcel on the river, artist studios, food trucks. It is an absolute gem what they have developed there. One developer apparently really did the whole downtown, but they added on that section much later, and it has changed that community. And I think that this is what what Gainesville holds if we really do this in the right way of really making it this unique. And, you know, just like the water tower, if they put a gigantic mural in that just alone to see what you can see through there, to me, it just speaks volume of what's possible. And I congratulate you for taking this on. I was in the first committee when they tried to do the same thing in 2013. But I think that this is the time that we really need to step up and just get this on the road. And I congratulate you guys for just really making this a possibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Michael Blackley, followed by Harley O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honorable commissioners. My name is Michael Blatchley. I have the privilege of having been Director of Performing Arts at the University of Florida and Director of its parallel program at Florida State University in Tallahassee. And I reference that because they tie in with my perspective on where we are as we move forward. I believe Gainesville is ripe for the kind of development that we're discussing right now, and I applaud you for taking this forward. I'm going to suggest that it focus much of the discussion around an artisan community that can be established that in and of itself creates a sense of destination. Ideas to populate the Power District include, and it's not limited to this, and please bear with me, but existing cultural programs such as Crosstown Repertory Theater, the Actors Warehouse needing space, an ideal location to keep it in the community. Local artists, visionaries, entrepreneurs, pioneers could stimulate the addition of artist studios, small performance venues, rehearsal space for local bands, musical groups, dance studios, writers' workshops, animation studios, glass blowing, leather works, iron sculpting, thrift stores, bike and scooter shops, record stores, and the like, all based on a model that exists right now in Tallahassee in Railroad Square. Ties also in with some business opportunities and applaud what has happened with Depot Park, with Main Street, and the other connecting points, even to tie in such an idea with First Magnitude in terms of the microbrewery trend that is established right now that also incorporates much of the arts. I believe it needs to be a grassroots initiative. I do understand it's going to take money, and I understand that the development part of this is not to be minimized, and it needs to be brought in such a way that it's not just about the dollars, but it's about creating the destination. A Gainesville Artist Alliance could be part of taking these concepts forward conceptually, as has been done in some other communities. Railroad Square is a 10-acre parcel, so it's a little bit smaller than what we're discussing here, but it has 70 galleries, studio shops, and other units, including food outlets. And similar developments have taken place not only in Florida. Knoxville, Tennessee is a classic example with what they've done with the old city. The bottom line is we've got the space, we've got the opportunity. This city and county supports the arts. It supports it in a great way, as does Leon County and Tallahassee. I would not want to miss the opportunity to advance an artistic destination for this part of our city that could create Gainesville, a city for the arts. Thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Well, we don't do the clapping, and the reason we don't do the clapping is because we don't want jeering. So if you can't do one, you can't do the other. So that's why we keep the rules in place. So, thanks.
Harley O'Neill is our final speaker.
Hello, everyone. My name's Harley. I'm a local artist in town, and thank you again for being so receptive and open to all of these ideas. I really just kind of want to echo, I can't say it more eloquently than what Michael said, but just want to echo that there has been a lot of community-led research by a few organizations in town, like mine and some others, that are asking their following and their artists and creatives what they need, and we desperately need space for artists. And so I agree that I think an arts alliance would be something that would be wonderful to develop, to invest in. And I just imagine that if any of these buildings are salvageable, it would be so wonderful to see them, facing this this trail, this corridor, this greenway that a lot of people are talking about. This gives us access to nature. It offers social connection. These spaces can offer residencies to local artists and help establish a more permanent creative culture in Gainesville, one that's a little less transient, because as I've grown up here, and I'm just one of the very many who have done their fair share of leaving and coming and returning, because we love Gainesville. It's a great place to live, but it's a hard place to make a living for creatives. So I think more structures in place that could allow for rehearsals and studio rentals, workshop rentals, would just be the very beginning of something that could be really wonderful to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Book, did you have more comments, or was that from earlier?
I do have more comments.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Commissioner Williams, I know you hadn't spoken before. Did you want to go before? I'll go after you. Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do have a few thoughts here as it relates to this area, and the beauty about all the feedback that we've heard about, whether it's connectivity or Arts Alliance or green space or innovative building, is the fact that the space is sufficiently large to allow for many of those things. Right? The question is, how do we do many things over time when we've been speaking about it since 2013? And I wish, instead of perhaps making a motion and trying to move forward on the next year to two on this, we'd be cutting a ribbon on what was done over since 2013 in the Power District. So a few things. I'm mindful of what Commissioner Eastman said related to, I'm concerned that we have the ability to control what's going to occur in a big way and a good way on these particular parcels. And yet I know we had some significant discussion at the commission within the last few weeks that related to, we do still need to push forward with what we have in front of us and move it with kind of two thoughts in mind. We hope for the best. I think Commissioner Chestnut, you had said this before. We hope for the best and prepare the other way, right? So as it relates to that, the 3 or 4 things I already said, I won't repeat, is probably something I'll be prepared to make a motion once my colleagues have spoken, but it will deal with something like update the appraisal. That's absolutely essential. We all know we have to do that. I would like to have a little more significant staff report in this one city concept between GRU and the manager relating to, if we were to split the parcels, what could that look like and what rezoning might be necessary for that, even knowing that there's some uncertainty. We have some staff with some expertise that could provide us some idea of what that process might look like. And then the 2 other aspects that are pretty important. We've had some brownfield and remediation in areas of the city going back long before I was here, and I've been here 40 years. And we do need some understanding of at least the current picture without spending a lot of money to figure out what that might be as it relates to the environmental impact of this particular area. If that's proceeding reports, well, then we'll have to use proceeding reports. But any additional information we could get about that, if something were to be done here, we need to know. Because we don't want to be stopped in our tracks when we get community input down the road, and 2 years from now, we try to move forward, and all of a sudden we've come across a brownfield that is almost impossible to remediate. So that would be the third thing, is remediation and federal funding streams. And then the last piece would simply be the fact that we do have to get renewed community input just beyond the good input we've had today, because not everybody knows. And that would clearly be right there in the area. And how that would be done, I would obviously defer to the combined staff of GRU. How do we do that? But we need something that's pretty significant about, you have big area, big plans, big vision, and Mr. Batista, I think, said something. It's not all about economic value, but there's a lot of value to this area, whether it's economic, environmental development or not. So we need to get it right, and I hope in a year from now we're doing something really good. I'll be prepared to make a motion similar to what I said.
Right.
Ma'am? Oh, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Sacco. Thank you. Well, those would be my ideas. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I think before we leave, we'll let staff question us back and make sure that we're giving you some general direction to come back to us in a couple of months on some steps forward. Commissioner Willits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a somewhat large property, depending on whether we're talking about all all 6 or the original 3 that we started this process talking about. I'm concerned about the GRU bill because whatever we envision for this property, a different, if it's appointed by a board appointed by the governor, there would be nobody that you could, threaten with, I will not vote for you unless you do X or X. The people who would control the disposition of this land, of these assets, would not be people that are elected by the community and elected by, the ratepayers. So that is definitely a concern of mine. This property, at the same time, the other thing that's happening in Tallahassee with JLAC is that they have really said that in order to make GRU even stronger and even more stable than it is right now, that the general fund transfer probably needs to be cut to a very large degree, and we've heard this conversation. And that the other side of that is that the general government side must reduce spending or raise revenue or some combination of the both. I'm going to be clear that I want to make sure that we return some of this, or a lot of this, to taxable, revenue generating property, because we are a city with a lot of public property in the form of universities and hospitals, and then a lot of other land that is sensitive that we've protected for conservation, preservation, and just plain old parks. And so there's a lot of land that we don't get to tax that other cities do. We have a university that does not buy power from our local utility, the way that it happens in Tallahassee, or lots of, all of the power from. And so I think we are being tasked by the legislature on the general government side, in coordination with our utility, that we have got to find other ways to fund the city than through the the kind of profits from our utility. So I think we do need to look seriously at this land to make sure that it is providing, that one of the things it provides, whether it's just, or whether it's housing, whether it is other forms of recreation, of cultural affairs, of environmental protection, of commerce, placemaking, connectivity, but that it needs to provide taxes to the city. And that is, I don't want to say that's my number one goal. I think that's my number one goal after what the legislature told us. Before that, it wouldn't have been my number one goal. It would have been about, housing people close to where they work and live and play, and where they can jump on a trail and they can ride a bike. If nursing students can ride a bike to where they do their education. Nurses, respiratory techs, surgeons. I had, in my previous job, surgical residents who do cycle from downtown to go be a surgical resident. I don't like them on a bicycle because accidents happen, but it's this facility. This is such an interesting place of where it sits in our community, because it is close to a $50 million investment in the form of Depot Park. It is close, across from currently our bus station that connects people all across our region, downtown, and then the Depot Avenue Trail, which really connects them then to tens of thousands of jobs that exist in the form of UF, the VA, the hospitals, and then if you're even further to Butler Plaza. So it's really important to me that Gainesville is for people as well, and that we house some people who would love to live there and be part of our downtown community. Because as much as we want it to be a destination, it is. But destinations that don't house people, I'm a little concerned about, because otherwise we're just talking about people traveling from one side of the county downtown. But where are the people going to live? Are they still going to live in Hale Plantation and drive, or are some of them going to live right here? So I'm excited by that. This site also becomes problematic though, because when everyone wants a use of it, and Commissioner Book, he mentioned that it's big enough that there's a lot of things we can do, and I agree. But when we have limitations on one side because of how tall it can be built, when we have environmental limitations on some of it, that though we say it should be high value property, some people may not be willing to pay for it because of the remediation that has to happen. And then if we want to get the goal of maybe some reuse of some of these, well, if the ones we want to reuse are flat warehouses on the portion of the land that you could build a 4-story building on, that land does now not have that same value to someone who might want to build a 4-story apartment building on the land that is available. If we take additional parkland, that's even more. I am interested in that a portion of this somewhere somehow could be community land trust, so that some of the new housing that is built, and particularly if we're going to talk about artists still have to have a place to live. And I don't, when we build things like this, it will probably increase the value of every single property around it to a huge degree, because people will want to live close to it. So I'm a little concerned that we also need to make sure that some of this is in that kind of community land trust. But as I said, that's a competing interest of, I want some tax revenue. So, so that those are competing interests. Now, I recognize that. But the way I see it is that, we're still going to need some more of that vision from the community in particularly acknowledging those conflicts. Because I can hear all the interest, but if they're, I don't want just us to have to decide the priorities of those conflicts. I want the community to kind of come together with some of that prioritization and saying, well, we're going to lose some here, we're going to gain some here. Property 6, that's good parking for overflow I park in that lot anytime there's Pride, Fall Arts Festival. So, these are competing things that I think we need to be aware of. And I want to have that conversation with the community. Not just the greatest hopes and dreams, because right now in this community, we're going to talk about it, but it's also a community conversation of how we prioritize things, because we have deadlines coming up early this fall about our budget, about GRU, and somewhere, somehow, there have to be revenues raised or a lot of cuts somewhere else. There's going to have to be a lot of imagining what we do in the future. And I want to make sure the community has that conversation with us. But the things on this that I'm thrilled about, I love to daylight portions of the creek, love it to be a connection, a multi-use connection, because we do have some connectivity problems right around here. Sometimes even just from downtown to Depot Park, the connectivity is just a little odd because of some decisions of past commissions about what street parking that is no longer public street parking, it's private street parking with fences. And so connectivity, and I do support the idea that we look at it, that we cut up some of the parcels and that we have a granular redevelopment of it, as opposed to one just big, huge, because I think we get a better urban fabric with smaller projects. In some places we've leaned towards very, very large projects. I like the idea of smaller projects, but again, I think there could be some problems with that idea as well, because someone, in order to develop portions of it that are restricted height, they may need other portions where they can do a little more to make it pencil out. So that's one of the problems I think we'll see with doing really granular development, when there's all these overlays, that we may have some, we may have some trouble finding people who are willing and to develop in that way. But then again, maybe the portion that's going to be limited to 3 stories is maybe that portion could be community land trust. So even within what I've said, there's some contradictions, but those are some of the things we're going to have to deal with. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Willits. Commissioner Sacco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think the point was brought up a few times about having local preferences, but I know that we've had penalties and issues prior when this commission has decided to above procurement processes and rankings to go local. So I wanted to ask the manager and the attorney if, moving forward on this issue, if there would be any such limitations as we've had in the past that make it not necessarily difficult, but something we should be conscious of if we supersede like procurement or staff rankings.
Excuse me. My immediate thought on that is that because we're not dealing with federal or state funds with any stipulations on them, they're local, this commission can make a decision to have a local preference, I believe, as long as, for example, ARPA, other funds like that. are not involved, I don't think it would be an issue. It's the funding source, I think, that limits
And
us.
GRU, Mr. Hutchinson, GRU owns all of these in full. Like, there's no partnership like we would have with the old depot. Like, all of these are wholly 100% GRU. Yes,
That's
I got a
correct.
head nod. Yes.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, so all the properties are technically they're owned and titled to the city of Gainesville, but GRU manages them and GRU and utility funds purchase them, and we've had no partnerships or anything like that. It's just
Unencumbered.
all utility funds.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. In that case, then I'd be perfectly fine having that as a consideration. I just wanted us to, we got hit once. I don't want to get hit again. But I think we have I think we've seen, at least in the 3 years I've been here, a lot of local development and developers that are really conscious and have good working relationships with us, that would already be mindful of a lot of the needs and preferences of our community and have shown fairly good community outreach standards. To that credit, to Commissioner Willett's point about making as much of this taxable, I don't disagree. You're right, because we are the seat of the county and kind of the district and the circuit and the district and everything else. A lot of our land gets eaten up. So I would like to see as much as possible and feasible return to that tax roll, because this is potentially 27 acres. It'll probably be less than that because we've taken out some of those parcels. It's just not to be part of the negotiations, but easily 20 acres of land adjacent to downtown. And you're right, the value is going to go above everything else around it, which does help the tax roll, but I want to see as much of this help the whole of the city, because I don't want this to be, we all love Depot Park, it's a jewel, but I live very far from it, I have to drive, or come here and then walk all the way down, which is fine if the weather's not 90 degrees. But a lot of folks who don't necessarily live nearby, that becomes a very exclusive jewel to access if you don't have the right form of transit, because even if you have a car, parking is hard sometimes. So I don't want whatever gets built here to be for the exclusive use of the surrounding areas. I want it to be something that contributes to the whole, and that is by tax base, getting back on the tax rolls and increasing the value of everything else, which then contributes to the tax rolls. That's great. That can be redistributed across the whole city, and that benefit does give to everyone, not just one particular area or radius. I don't dislike the community land trust idea of keeping some portion of it in trust, if only to ensure that there is, as the values of everything else goes around, there isn't necessarily a displacement or a pushing out of folks that live there. Because I know on Depot Avenue, if you go east another like block or two, we have some, I'm going to be kind and call them historic structures that I think were built during World War II, I want to say, that they were little hangars that are now duplexes. Interesting construction, let's call them. I don't want to...
Quonset huts.
Huh?
Quonset huts.
Is that what that term is? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I've had friends that live there, but I don't want to start forcing people out as we build this up. So if we can put land in trust to kind of ensure still some options for folks once this goes up and becomes beautiful and wonderful and everyone wants to move to it or be around it, I want us to have some portion that is still accessible. So that would be one consideration I would put at the top of my priorities. I know staff had theirs, but I think making sure that it tax roll, redistribute, and some land to remain accessible for potentially displaced or displaceable neighbors, that would be kind of my priority. Because I know staff is looking for ideas. We can't make a motion, but staff getting ideas, those would be kind of my priorities as we look at it. Trying to think if there was anything else. No, I think we are good for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Eastman.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to respond to some of the folks that were there. I'll start with Jackie Davis. Jackie, yeah, so I love your idea about having local developers. I think as other folks set up there. We need to look over at the quick deed question, but my understanding is that this is a capital asset of Gainesville Regional Utilities as per their bond covenants. So it's not quite as easy as just saying, we'll transfer this over without at least a change of funding or something like that. But I know that staff is looking at that because we are obviously in the situation that we are in, but it seems like most things I find in government much more complicated once you start pulling back the lid of it. Leona Daupier, am I saying? Daupier, I agree, what's that? Gautier, beautiful last name. I agree with you about the building heights. I would not be in favor of removing that step down. One of the things that came out of the 2013 plan is that this needs to be interfaced well with the adjacent neighborhoods. This is next to a series of neighborhoods. So I would not be in favor of that, though I would take a look at that overlay goes also west of the creek in that U9 zone and everything around that. I believe it's DT above all of this. So it may be worth looking at the heights west of the creek, not adjacent to the single family neighborhoods. But I think we do need to be continuing in that 2013 idea of that, of that step down and making sure that we're respecting those. And then Michael Blatchley mentioned Railroad Square. It's interesting hearing Railroad Square. I essentially grew up in Tallahassee, and I kind of grew up running around Railroad Square. My godmother was an artist there. My father actually owns a clothing shop called Halisi Africa, if anyone wants to stop by Railroad Square. And so I spent a lot of years running around there. And one of the things I always found interesting about Railroad Square is it reminds me more of sort of like the South Main area or the Grove Street area. It was always a sort of a like they sold wood in the spot that you're talking about, the warehouse area. I remember that being a place that would just sell 2x4s. You could go by there. But the city of Tallahassee invested a lot in a great park, kind of their version of Depot, just north of there. Great skate park nearby. Improved the roads. Some apartments went in, and so I think I agree with what some folks here are saying, which is how do we make sure that this kind of fits into the overall vision of it? Because there are local entrepreneurs creating amazing arts districts without any help from the city. I mean, go down to what Hoach is doing down at South Main area or what they're doing up at Grove Street. I mean, there's local entrepreneurs who are rehabbing certain areas. What I look at a lot with this is our downtown strategic plan, which is kind of looking at where the kind of overall economic conditions of everything and what is most needed. And they keep pointing out, and they said, I'll quote it here, this plan strongly emphasizes the need for non-student housing development in the greater study area with student housing focused closer to campus. I mean, one of the things that has changed since this came out in 2013 really is Celebration Point and everything that happened west. One, they built, it says here, 2.3 million square feet of retail out on the west side, which means they say we are oversupplied by 3.1 million square feet of retail space in the city of Gainesville, which makes retail very complicated to do. And they keep kind of emphasizing that throughout our downtown strategic plan, that there is such an oversupply in the West that we have to really be thoughtful about what kind of retail will work in downtown, but also that all the new housing that has come in essentially has been student housing. And there's a lot of people that want to live near downtown. There's a lot of people that want to shop in the shops in downtown. Particularly, we're having, the baby boomers are now looking at retiring. They're looking at a lot of them downsizing from their homes, and there's just nowhere for folks to go. And so finding a way to ensure that there's housing that's there that is affordable, that's mixed income, but also is matching what they're saying is they're seeing and the overall needs of it. I mean, the more people that you get that are living near downtown and walking to downtown, all the folks here are downtown folks. I mean, you shop, get coffee at Volta, you go and you get a drink at the Bull on the weekends, right? It's you are a part of the economy of downtown, and getting more people will improve an arts district. It will improve all the local entrepreneurs that are down there, and finding a way that does that still matches the character of the neighborhoods that are nearby is going to be important. A lot has changed since then. We had a CRA, a statutory CRA back then that allowed us to be able to consider spending $30 million on a single parcel, which is not quite where we are here. We're in a place where we're cutting, so this is going to take a lot of staff time in terms of the bigger public-private partnerships, and we're looking at staff really focusing on some of these big issues related to the JLAC and the things that we have over these next couple of years. So I want to find a way that we can continue to move forward with some of the bigger ideas and the concepts that were in that 2013 plan, while still recognizing that we're in a very different world here just 10 years later than we were back in 2013. I think there's a way we can do it, and I think we should be really excited about it, but I also would encourage everyone to think about this in terms of how does this fit into a larger picture, including, what we're seeing local entrepreneurs doing nearby, what we're seeing people doing on South Main based on the investments that we've made there, and how does that fit into the overall puzzle in the picture. So that's my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eastman. Mr. Chestnut.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to share a couple of my thoughts too. For staff, I am very interested in having local developers. I think that we need a commitment there. I would also suggest that we invite the Chamber of Commerce to the table so that they can help us as well. I'd like the idea of a lot split to follow up on what Dr. Blatchley was saying about the Railroad Square and the Artisan Studios down in Tallahassee. I think if Commissioner Duncan Walker was here, she would say consider a cultural arts center. Also for staff to look at the Greenville, South Carolina. You didn't say what it was, Randy. Is it a...
It's an arts community of Riverfront. They established all
Okay, an arts community there, mentioned by Randy Batista. You can contact him as well. But I think we've gotten lots of ideas, and it seems that one of the overwhelming ideas is let's go local. Let's invest our dollars locally so that they can circulate in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut. Commissioner Willits.
Thank you. I only had one thing quick to add, because I don't think I got it in there. Part of the idea of community land trust, it's not just even in these parcels, but that if there's opportunities, particularly just outside of this, to put that land in trust. Because if this is redeveloped, any kind of different model, it is going to raise the value of the land beside it. Once it's just clean and it's no longer industrial, the land beside it is going to rapidly probably increase in value. Even if it's zoned literally just single family, whatever, because people can knock down one house and build a very large single family home because they want to live next to nice amenities. So also, this is the type of thing is if we already owned a bunch of other land around it to put that in, or can work with people to put that in trust, so that as those, to get to the land before the values go up. And that's, I think, a lot of community land trust is one of the problems is you don't always have the money when you need to buy it early or not buy it and or put stipulations on it before land values go up. But this is a situation where we literally know anything we do to this property, anything actually, because we'll be improving, because we'll no longer be industrial and there'll be possibly some environmental remediation. Anything we do, the land out, bordering this, particularly to the east, some to the north, that land is going to go up. So what we do, if there's some ability to think through some of that, take some of those opportunities to put any of the land in trust, or work with any community partners who might also be interested at this time to put some of that land in trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willits. So it's to expand on what you were just saying there. As we consider all the things we're doing on Hawthorne Road and at 8th and Waldo, we need to keep that in mind as well, because as we invest public money, private money is likely to follow in each one of these places, and we want to invest the public money. We have these plans in place already. We want to do that. It's good for the community to do that, but we need to be fully aware that prices will go up if we don't find a way to mitigate those prices going up. That's a side conversation, but it is an important one to remember, not just about this, but about the other places that we are currently working on. So some things I would like staff to be able to consider. First of all, perhaps we could bring back another conversation on June 8th at our GPC meeting, and we could look then at future GPC meetings to discuss what might be shuffled around a little bit so that we could have a substantial conversation about this. There is no, I don't think, just to give everyone some comfort, there is nothing on the calendar now on the horizon that is going to be the Power District meeting. It's going to be a series of conversations as we're able to figure out what the community wants, what staff needs from us, and what we intend as a commission. I just don't see us making the big decision on some date that we can count on right now. So be at ease about that, but keep your wheels turning as we move forward. So I'd like us to consider that for perhaps June 8th at GPC. Some of the things we'll need at staff's convenience, as you can do this without upending everything else you do. Updated appraisals are going to be important, just so we know what we're working with. Building condition reports, not perfect ones, but just a general idea of what's possible with the buildings as they exist and what it would cost to make them usable if they're not. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect, just a ballpark that we can work with so that we know what we're talking about. I'd like to get an idea of how we might make sure we have an easement on the thick creek line there, to make sure that there is an opportunity to either daylight or build something over the top of that serves the purpose of daylighting. I again tend to believe that we're probably a whole lot less expensive to build a really great feature over the top of what's there than digging it up. Just a thought. But we need to know how we would make that easement happen and that it can happen, and I'm sure that it can. And ideas for how we might involve local developers in working through this process with us. And with an idea, I think that we could probably offload some of this onto someone to be able to hire someone who does, that is a trusted local developer who could lead us through this process instead of us pretending that we know everything we need to know. So those are some things I would like staff to come back with. And if they don't all make it back for June 8th, that's okay. This is an ongoing conversation. But what we must do, I believe, is get through this process and keep the wheels turning so that 10 years from now, we don't look back and say, gosh, I wish we had done something with that property. That's the only, to me, completely unacceptable outcome. We have to be able to consistently push forward so that something good happens with this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I might, I have a couple of additional items that I had on my list that you didn't mention,
Please.
so I just wanted to make sure. So we talked about the updated appraisal, any updated information around the environmental conditions of the parcels, visioning out of the parcelization in terms of, what needs to be addressed or remediated, holding a community charrette. You didn't mention that, and I just wanted to put it back out there just to see if that's something that you would expect between now and June 8th.
I don't think between now and June 8th, that's a
not a
fairly
problem.
tight
I just wanted to
timeline.
put it out.
It is something that needs to happen, but I don't think it has to be done by June 8th.
Okay, making way for local preference wherever those opportunities are. Exploring the whole Artisan Square Cultural Arts Center piece, which is appropriate because we have the consultant on board right now that's actually doing a little work, so we may be able to intersect something there. Taking a look at community land trust carve-outs, if possible, keeping an eye on gentrification and stuff. So those are the items that I have.
Right, I think that
And making
covers
sure we're
everything we
aligned with
talked
the downtown strategic plan wherever we can.
Yes, all the things, yes. But I again, I'll reiterate that if we're not done with all those items by June 8th, it doesn't mean we can't have the next conversation.
But we have a list that we can.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here, and anyone who's watching at home. Please keep your wheels turning. Talk to the commissioners individually. We want a great outcome from this, and the only way we're going to do that is if we raise that level of conversation so that it's not possible to just put it off to the side. Thank you all for being here today and for your effort. I appreciate you, and we are adjourned.